I expect that very soon I'll be reading a book in the 33 series by Bloomsbury about the groceries the author bought on the day they first listened to the record they're discussing. That is because the books I've read so far in this series have this tendency to be very free in their interpretation of what the series is about. And I was expecting, when I first approached the series, these books to be commentaries and close listenings of the albums of these, you know, great records of popular music of the last 50, 60 years. But instead, each author gives their own perspective on the record. And some books are actual close listenings, some books are take a more historical perspective. And for instance, If You're Feeling Sinister, which I've read recently, talks almost not at all about the actual record If You're Feeling Sinister, but is still a very interesting history of indie pop music and rock music in the 90s, especially in Britain. Meat is Murder by Joe Pernice takes this process a step further and is a fiction book. It's not a commentary on Meat is Murder at all, it's not a close listening, it's not a historical book, it's not a book about the band, it's fiction. It's a short novel, it's really halfway between a novella and a long short story. I'd say it has the scope of a novella about a kid who lives in close to Boston in the 80s and is obsessed with the Smiths, and about the weeks in which he discovers Meat is Murder and becomes obsessed with it. Now, if you are the kind of person who doesn't, you know, care that the book they bought thinking it was a commentary on a record by the Smiths is fiction, if that doesn't, you know, doesn't bother you, and it shouldn't, because you should always keep an open mind with books as with anything else, this can be great fun. While at the same time I'm not really sure whether I'm satisfied with what Pernice offers in this book or not. Let's take a step back. I'm a huge Smiths fan, who isn't these days, and Meat is Murder among the records is probably the one I'm obsessed with the most, with the possible exception of Louder Than Bombs. If you ask me, the Smiths are one of those bands where it's quite difficult to point at a specific record and say, yeah, that one is definitely their best, because it's not that the records all sound the same, but at the same time their studio albums, and Louder Than Bombs 2 and Hutful of Hollow 2, have, if you ask me, that same type of quality. In all of these records, there's maybe one song that's not really on the same level as the others. There are amazing hits, there are amazing singles, but yeah, it's difficult to find that one element that makes a record different or makes it stand out in their production. They're, you know, homogeneously awesome, all of their albums. But Meat is Murder, if you ask me, is maybe the only one that's in so many ways flawless. And it's a record I was obsessed with a lot a few years ago. The last thing I'll add about my experience with Meat is Murder, before the actual review begins, is that unlike the rest of the world, I do not share the obsession people have with How Soon Is Now. I know so many people think it's the best song the Smiths ever recorded. I don't know, it never impressed me especially much. I actually prefer the version of Meat is Murder without How Soon Is Now. In that case, I think it's an impossibly tight and perfect and flawless record, but each to their own, right? Joe Pernice's novella about Meat is Murder. It's complicated, because in some ways this is a great read because it captures what it meant to be a Smiths fan in a specific social milieu, which is that of, you know, the America of the 80s, the America where if you didn't listen to cock rock, if you didn't listen to, you know, arrogant rock and roll, AOR, that kind of music, you were considered a faggot, and, you know, your life will turn into hell. Which is mixed in the novel, in the novella, with the fact that it is an exploration of what it meant to be a high schooler in a Catholic high school in New England, which meant that, you know, high school has been hell, I mean, since forever, I think. Who has had, you know, everyone hates high school sucks. If you add to that experience the kind of, you know, the fact that, you know, your music tastes make a social pariah out of you, it turns into a shitstorm. And the novella explores that beautifully. It explores how the record, which in many ways is the source of this character's pain, is also what helps them cope with, you know, that terrible world, with that oppressive reality, with that world in which it seems like everyone is out to kill you or to turn you into a desperate ball of misery. It's difficult to articulate, and it's probably easier for you to just read the novella, but Meat is Murder explores so many sides of adolescence in a very clear and very interesting way, and I'm sure all of you will relate with, for instance, the way Pernice's narrator describes how, you know, the problems of intertwining closely a music record with a crush of yours, and the difficulties you face when, you know, your passion for one of the two eventually fades. And it's an exploration. It's an exploration that's not too sweet, not too cheesy, of one of the things people always say about music, which is that in certain cases music can save lives, and it helps you, you know, understand that other people feel as miserable as you and help you cope with your reality. And this novella explores that beautifully, and on that front everything's great, while at the same time, narratively speaking, and I have to speak about narrative, it's not like it's such a rewarding book, because, as I mentioned, it has the scope of a novella and it introduces so many interesting narrative threads, but doesn't really resolve any of them. You're told that the main character wants to start a band, the main character, you know, knows a kid who has a terminal illness, the main character has a crush on a classmate of his. Will how do any of these narrative threads end? They don't. They kinda don't. And I'm not saying that to spoil you the book. There are other very interesting narrative threads in here for you to explore. I'm saying that to prepare you to the type of narrative you're going to face. This feels a little bit like that kind of literary short story, epiphanic short story, plotless moment of truth, that you find a lot in the fiction of people such as Alice Munro, for instance. It feels like that, and that's disappointing, because considering how well written in so many ways this book is, and considering how easy it would have been for it to have a satisfying narrative structure, it's kind of a bummer that, you know, it ends the way it does. And that is without considering the fact that as a book called Meat is Murder, in a series that analyzes and that talks about great records of the 20th century and 21st century, Meat is Murder is not so specifically central to this narrative, and had any other record being the main character's obsession, most of the book would have remained the same, which in some ways is fine, in some ways it isn't. Mind, the book does talk about Meat is Murder, it's just that it talks about it very little. If you are obsessed with the record, do check this book out, because it's very short, it's an interesting short story, you will probably relate with the narrator's experiences of adolescence. It's not entirely unrewarding at all, but still, I'm puzzled, I'm not so sure I enjoyed it so much. If you're looking for, you know, information, if you're looking for a history of the Smiths, or, you know, for an analysis of Meat is Murder, anything of the sort, you won't really find it in here. What you'll find it here in Pernice's Meat is Murder is a description of what it meant to be a Smiths fan in the 1980s in America. That's interesting and it's relevant. It's up to you to decide if that's enough to justify the book. I liked it. I had lots of reservations. What did you think? Did you read Pernice's Meat is Murder? Did you like it? Did it bother you that it was fiction? Did you find out once you bought the book? Did you already know? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what your favorite Smiths record is in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.